Welcome to today's episode of the Just Call Dad podcast. I am here with Nate Evans Jr., and I am so excited to sit down and just talk with him a little bit on this podcast about being a dad, being an author, being a speaker, being somebody who has a lot of dreams and goals, and how we do that as dads, how we balance that. And maybe you're a dad feeling the same way. And the mission of our podcast is just teaching you how to be just a call away. Good days, bad days, all the days in between. And I know Nate and I have probably had our share of all of those types of days. So, Nate, how are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm great, Sean. I'm great. In dad mode, woke
Mm.
up, uh, just got in motion, man. Get the dogs out, get the bottles ready, get the coffee brewing. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I didn't get to really sip my coffee too much, just in motion, but
Yeah.
I'm feeling good, man. Thank
How
you.
often do you get a warm cup of coffee throughout the week? That's a good starting question as a dad.
To be honest, almost every day.
Good.
We used to go. We have a thing out here called Wawa,
Mm.
which is like our little convenience store. It's incredible. It's a gas station, convenient, everything. So I was going there for a long time, and then I was like, this is costing me a lot. So we ended up getting like this huge, brand new like Ninja coffee machine where we can make all types of stuff. So that's my baby right there. Outside
Mm.
of my son, that's my baby. I go down there and get the coffee brewing and get the day started. You know what I mean?
I do. I made a post one time on Threads about coffee and getting a warm cup of coffee, and the kids were quiet, and I was kind of feeling like eerie because they were so quiet. And I'm like, is everything okay? I think what's interesting, I try to get up early, and I try to instill that in my kids, but at the same time, sometimes I instill it too much because my daughter gets up early, and then I never get that quiet time. And it's so valuable as a dad, especially a dad like you that's trying to create, to have some time like that, because if we don't create margin, it's gonna consume us. Being a dad's great, but we also need to be a dad from a place of being filled, right? Our cup being filled. So how have you felt having a young son? I know you and I talked through the day. How are you able to kind of fill your cup up as a dad and somebody who's has that entrepreneur mindset who's trying to help other people? You got to start by helping you. So how do you do that? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, man. I'll be honest. It's not simple. It's not easy. But it's like, what's the other option? If not, my sanity is gone. So for me, it does look like getting up early. I try to get up as early as I can. 4:45, 5 a.m. Sometimes it's a little later, 5:30. But for me, it's important to have those moments of just quiet before my son's up, before my wife's really up, getting ready for work. I try to go in my office and just, for me, it looks like prayer. Writing down things and just silence, just
Mm.
like thinking about what I'm thinking about. Like, Nate, how do you feel? Doing some type of self inventory. And again, it doesn't happen every single day, but I try my best to do and set that margin because once he's up, it's boots on the ground. You know what I mean? I'm running around, we're doing this, we're getting ready for daycare. But in between that time frame of my wife, she's a counselor. She does drug and alcohol counseling. So while she's working and doing the thing that she loves to do, we still send my son to daycare, even though I may come back and just work in the office, which is at home. And for me, I have that gap between about 7 to, let's say, 3 p.m. It's like that's my time. It's go to the gym. It's to check in with myself. It is to do everything that I need to do within that time frame. And then once I go get him from daycare, it is shut everything down. Initially starting out, it was go, 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 go. It was like you said, that entrepreneur grind, Gary V kind of mindset where you're pushing through, and then every gap you can find throughout the day. But I realized I was one, burning myself out, but two, it was somewhat unfair because it was like, man, this is your time for your family, for your son. I know it's earlier than what most people would shut it down, especially entrepreneurs, but it's like, hey, you have to do what works best for you. So in between that time frame, it's like, hey, man, do what you can do. Be as productive as you can. Have your phone on do not disturb. Try not to be on social media. Like, actually focus, get things done, and utilize this as your time. So when it comes to the weekends, when it comes to 3:30 p.m., it's like, hey, you can do your best to unplug. And that doesn't mean that I still don't have maybe a meeting here or two or something that I need to do. But I do my best to maximize on that time that I have.
I think that's important. And I think a lot of dads need to hear that because sometimes they feel like, you know what, if I don't take all of my time and give it to my kids, I'm doing something wrong. I know I feel that. I think the word I comes to my mind is like almost a shame, right?
Yeah.
Like, ooh, I want to be a leader for my daughters. I have three daughters, and I feel like this pressure all the time to be the perfect dad for them because I want to set an example of what they want to look for someday. And it's hard for me because I think what you're saying is something I need to do a better job of. Having that cutoff time, having that intentionality. And I definitely feel like a lot of dads need that advice that you just gave, and I'm guessing that it didn't just happen for you. I'm guessing that this was a
Hmm.
process for you. So, what if a dad today wants to stop and start that type of process and have that margin built into their life? How can they get started from zero? How do they become that type of person that has that focus?
Yeah, it's one step at a time. It's the only way we can actually build discipline. It's like building muscle. It's like
Mm,
you got to go one rep at a time, one time going to the gym at a time. So with me, like you said, it didn't happen overnight, and I'm not perfect with it. I'm just progressing, and it
mm,
looked like having grace for myself. One of the biggest things for me as a dad is like, yo, I just want to be present as much as possible. I want to be the present father. However, what I realize is that if I'm always present and available, it doesn't allow me any time to build anything that can sustain the family, you know?
I
So
do.
it's like, man, it would be amazing to be with you guys 24/7. However, I do have to build something to sustain and help grow our families to where we need to be so we can do things, so we can take trips, so we can have money away for funds and all of these different things. It's like you have to put in the work. So for me, it was one letting go of the guilt and the shame wrapped
Hmm.
around it, realizing that, okay, there is no there's really no such thing as balance, if that makes sense. There's
Hmm.
rhythms. There's going to be a season now where, my son is in that toddler stage where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to get as much done as possible because there's also going to come a phase when he's 6, 7, 8, and 9, and he's having different events at school. And I want to be more present for those. So it's like, I got to find the rhythm. It's all based on for the men watching. It's like, hey, what season of life are you in? For me, I'm in the toddler stage. So it looks like, okay, I can step away for a moment in the office, ask my wife, like, hey, I need 2 to 3 hours just to focus on this. Can you, watch him on this Saturday morning? Okay, cool. And I can do that and then I can unplug. But there's going to be another season where my son needs me to be more present in regards to just being there. And it's like I want to have the margin to do so. So right now that those are the phases we're in. So for the men watching, ask yourself which phase are you in? And then you just adjust accordingly. Unfortunately, you can't always be there. You can't always just be present, but you can be present minded. So I want you to think about that. There's one thing for you to always be around, there's another thing for you to be around and be like alert, be attentive, not on your phone, not distracted, any of those things. You know what I mean? So for me, it is figuring out what's the rhythm for this current season because it can look different. There could be a season where business takes off and I got to fly more and travel more and do these things, but that's just the season I'll be in. And I got to find a rhythm of like, okay, if I'm traveling more, is my son old enough for him to take, to come with me during these times? Can I bring him with me to travel more and be on stages and do these trips? Okay, you know, when I come back home, can I just be present minded for a few days? Can I work for a week or two and then okay, let me take a week or two just to be home, just to be attentive, just to show up at the school. So it's understanding the season you're in, but one of the biggest and most important things to start off is just having grace for yourself because your intentions are right. You want to be there, you want to do these things. However, we do have responsibilities to make sure that we can be there.
I think that's powerful for a lot of reasons, but the main reason I would say that that's a powerful piece of advice for dads is to give grace because
Hmm.
dads go through so much internal shame, whether we want to talk about it or not. Whether we want to say, "Hey, I'm feeling this way" or not, we go through that, and it happens moment by moment, and we suppress it. I know for me, it was 6 years of suppressing that, right? That just at some point I broke, and I realized,
Wow.
you know what? Like I need to not suppress anymore. I need to share. And it's that differentiation between suppression and sharing, because then there's also that too much sharing, where you share so much you give power, right? You give power to it, and that's all that you can do. And I wrote down present minded for our listeners because honestly, doing something good can also take you away from the moment. And I that's where I'm at right now in my stage of life. We have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So we kind of span the same gap that you're in, but we
Hmm.
also are moving into that next phase. And it's an interesting transition for me. And so as you talk about being there, being present minded, I'm very in tune with that. And I'm able to apply that to my story. And that's what I would hope dads that are listening to this can do. Like maybe they're like, you know what, Sean and Nate are making, all this time to do interviews and podcasts. Like I can't do that, so I'm not going to try. Well, what they don't understand about your story and what they don't understand about my story is that this is a healing process for both of us. Even though people see what we're doing, they don't necessarily see what got us to this point. And so you're somebody now that shares on stages with people, that gets a chance to author books and talk about all of these things. Let's talk for a minute about not just that, because I want you to talk about that, but what got you to say, you know what, I'm going to do this for other people. So I want to kind of hear a little bit of your backstory and then your current story, what that means for you today.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was never a dream or something as a kid to be doing what I'm doing now. I thought that I would be playing basketball
Hmm.
professionally, whether that was NBA or overseas. That was the dream growing up for every, young male in my community where we
Yeah.
didn't have much, but we did have a basketball court. Um, I'm a kid who, lived in South Jersey, grew up in South Jersey, bounced around from school to school, went to 9 different schools from first grade to high school, and then dealt with a lot of trauma as well, but didn't have safe places or outlets to kind of release it, especially amongst other men. So I took a lot of those emotions and I put it into sports. And my sport was specifically basketball. It yielded me an opportunity to get a scholarship, which was huge because my parents were teenagers. They actually didn't graduate high school. So I was the first one in our immediate family to graduate high school, get a full ride scholarship. And I dealt with a very traumatic moment before my freshman year, where I lost my grandfather. He ended up having a this viral infection, kind of like just out of nowhere, sporadically, like took his life, and it sent me down this spiral of emotions and not knowing how to process them as a teenager, 17 going on 18 at the time. My mental health took a major hit, but again, I didn't really know how to process it all. So I dealt with just severe anxiety, severe depression, and I ended up leaving school 3 months into me being there on a full ride scholarship. I just left the school, told the coach I was leaving, forfeited my scholarship, came back home, and that led me to a cycle of still pursuing basketball, but also not understanding my emotions and how to express them. So I ended up bouncing around from school to school because I thought that if I changed my environment, it would actually change how I felt. But actually, what happened was I learned that everywhere you go, there you are. So no matter what school I was at, no matter what part of the country I was at, um, that kept coming up where it was like I'm struggling with these mental and emotional issues. And it's like, I'm gonna just run to the next place. And it wasn't until I was injured, I was playing home, playing basketball, and at the rec center, I ended up injuring my ankle really bad and tore several ligaments in my ankle, and I had to be in a boot. And that's where things started to take a pivot because the one scapegoat that I really had was basketball. So when I couldn't run to basketball anymore, it forced me to deal with the thoughts that I had been just allowing to ruminate in my mind freely. It was just kind of like, okay, I can't run anymore. I have to deal with what is this internal dialogue that I'm having right now. And it was one of the first times where I realized, like, hey, some of these thoughts aren't even mine. You know, the way you're talking to yourself, like how are you talking to yourself this like why? Like where's this coming from? And what would happen if you decided to just think something different or do something different? And I made a decision in that moment to take just extreme ownership of my life. And for me, being a man of faith, that looked like getting baptized, but then also it looked like going to therapy for the first time. That was like something we never talked about at my house or my community. Like it was, I've never even heard about it until like later on in college. And I was like, I gotta try something different. Like I know what pain feels like, I know what shame feels like, guilt. I need to at least try something different and try to help myself. And it wasn't an easy thing to do, but it was one of the best things I could have ever done. And I'll be honest, and this is for the fellas listening, it wasn't the first therapist for me that did it. I actually had to go to 3 different therapists because I just had to find my fit. Initially I went in thinking, oh, this person's going to just help hit, like they're going to heal me. I'm gonna go in, they're gonna give me some stuff to say or do, and it's going to, but it's like, oh no, you have to play a part of your own rescue. You actually have to speak up as well. You have to share what's on your heart. This is your safe space to do so, and I'm going to help you put the pieces together. But I didn't understand that initially, and it took me to my third therapist to really lock that in. And things started to transform from there, and I started to figure out my identity outside of just being an athlete. Because since I was like 2 years old, I was always Nate that played basketball. That's how people knew me. So figuring out who I was outside of my sport, figuring out that I'm much more than what I can do and how I perform. Like I'm something greater outside of that. Those are just roles and things that I do, but it's not who I am. That caused a big shift. And then I had an opportunity in 2017 to go and volunteer at an event where Eric Thomas,
Yeah,
ET the hip hop preacher,
it's awesome.
I had an opportunity to volunteer at an event in Philadelphia that he was hosting called Stay Ready. And from volunteering at that event where I couldn't afford a ticket to go, let's start there. But I got a volunteer opportunity. I found myself on stage as one of the hype men. Like I had a
That's
sign in my
awesome.
hand and I got to be on stage and kind of get the perspective of what it looked like.
Yeah.
And I also got to listen to all of the speakers, Eric Thomas, Jeremy Anderson, David Shands, Inky Johnson. I got to hear these guys speak, and
Oh, that's a good crew
what,
right there. Like
yeah,
I'm
it was
like, let's
fire,
go.
man.
I have
And what
quotes
it,
from him written on my wall. Like Eric, I love
oh
him,
yeah,
man. Yeah,
yeah, no, he's
I
phenomenal, man. He's
dude, yeah.
phenomenal. And what they shared while I was there, it did something to me internally where I was like, I want to do this for other people. Like I
Yeah.
feel like this is what I really want to do for other people, and I set out to do that, and long story short, it landed me to where I am today. Those individuals, Dr. Eric Thomas, Jeremy Anderson, Inky Johnson, I'm a part of their speakers program now. So those are my coaches now. So it's like a full circle moment. It was incredible, man. But yeah, that's what got me to this space of wanting to empower individuals and speak life into them. And this year particularly, focusing most of my attention on men is where I'm at.
So powerful. I mean, I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking about how in the world, that happens without, in my opinion, a divine intervention, right? That's what
Oh,
that
for
is.
sure.
And that's so cool because I know we get people to listen to this podcast that have all different faith journeys. You and I are men of faith. We believe in that part of our journey. But I have a hard time thinking anyone could hear that story and not see some divine intervention there. I mean, a guy
Oh
that
yeah,
can't afford a ticket to a place is now working for that. And that just makes me
it's
so
crazy.
pumped up. And I think that's what dads need to hear is like we're always kind of waiting for when is our big break moment going to happen, whether it's as a dad with our kid, like they're finally going to listen to put their clothes away, or you know what I mean, or they're finally going to hear the words that we say, right? Like that's the big break moment there. Or when is our career going to become our passion? Because for me, that's what I've always thought about is like I don't want to force passion, right? Like forced passion is not passion without there's no purpose there. That's just like it just burns out. And so for you, it's like, okay, you were divinely given an opportunity to keep your passion and your purpose aligned, and it also gets a paycheck, right? And that's what's kind of cool too. And I think a lot of dads are afraid to take risks like that because they don't know if the outcome's going to be like yours. But at the end of the day, even if the outcome's not like yours with that type of risk, with that type of mindset, it gets you further ahead than you were yesterday. And I just think
Oh
that's
yeah,
cool. I wrote down a quote that you said that everywhere you go, you are. And I love that. And I think you should probably, in my opinion, turn that into a kid's book. Like, I think that is something you should write
write
because I
that
think
down. That's good.
I think you need to do that one. That's something that I think you could speak. I'm sorry to like tangent here, but as an educator who works with kids, you may have just hit the nail on the head for what kids need to hear because they have so much shame from a young age, just like you do carrying it, and they use athletics as a coping mechanism. And even though my story's different, I listen to you and I hear myself in some of the story, and that's putting my identity in what I can or cannot do. And I think one thing you and I talked about is how can we tell our, for you, your son, for me, my daughter, all three of my daughters, how can I tell them that they're valued and worth something? And so when you said that, I was like, yes, that's something that you could do. And if we could teach kids that from a young age that all these people that come in and out of your life, they're gonna probably go. Even like I lost my grandma this last year, and to be transparent with you, it was hard on me. It created a lot of anxiety, and I would talk to her every day. But what I noticed is that even good people go away, right? We don't. There's an end point to everybody's story, but you exist for your entire story. And if you don't have security in yourself, even good people that come through your life are going to overlean on those people. And so, what I would want to know from you as I'm thinking about this and I'm listening and I'm kind of just digging deeply into it, and I can't channel ET, I can't do his like, but I
Right,
definitely have
right.
done a lot of 5 a.m. workouts with him just shouting in my ears, but I can't do that. I can't emulate it. But how can we as individuals, you and me, as dads of young kids, how can we put this into our kids' lives? Like how do we do this? Like what is your thought? Like how can I do it for my daughters? How can you do it for your son so that they believe this idea that everywhere you go you are and that you are enough?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things as I think about this, because my son's 2, is like, okay, he's going to gain a lot more from what I do than what I say.
Hmm.
Obviously, I'm going to give him lessons. I'm going to sit him down. I'm going to talk to him. But if those talks don't align with how I live day in and day out, it's going to be like fleeting.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's
I
like,
do.
it reminds me of when I was younger, I would hear people say all the time, do as I say, not as I do. And it's like, what? What does that mean? Like, you told me not
Yeah.
to do that, but I just watched you do it.
Hmm.
So it's one of the biggest things is how do we live this out? We talk about the fathers who are like, man, what if the outcome doesn't turn out this way? Maybe it won't, maybe it will. And maybe it'll look different. However, what does the process look like? Because your child is watching that. They're going to be able to look back like, yo, dad, like he really put in the work. Like dad was dedicated. He was focused. I watched him show up every single day in this way and love mom, or I watched him show up every single day and do these things because those are the principles you want to instill in them. It's not the results. It's like the things you want to pass down is the discipline, the hard work, the focus, the releasing of shame, the believing in themselves. These are the things you want to be able to pass on, but it's very difficult to pass it on if your words don't align with your actions.
Hmm.
So for me is every single day, trying to figure out the best way to display this. I want him to see a loving home. I want him to see me and his mother just loving on each other. I want him to see how we handle conflict as he grows older. I want him to see us reading in the house, writing in the house. I want to see him or I want him to see us being able to express our emotions when there's moments where tears are necessary. It's like I want
Hmm.
him to see these things so he know it's okay, so he can learn from it. So he'll never be able to say, uh, "Dad's words didn't align with his actions."
Hmm.
I can't tell you to pursue your dreams and your goals if I'm not even pursuing my own.
I love that. It's
So
almost
I
like they need
think
to
how
see you
we,
do that. They need to see it. They need to see you go to your office for an hour and they need to see you
hmm
say, "Hey, I'm going to work on my book right now." Like not that you don't matter
yeah,
to me, but like I'm doing this actually because I have a dream for this, right? This is my
yes,
dream and my dream doesn't have to be your dream, but I want you to have the same type of passion for yours, right? And I think that's what I hear you saying. And maybe what dads need to hear on this is like, "Hey, chase your dream. Don't just go
hmm
you know, every day and do a job that you have to do. Do a job that you truly want to do and be passionate about it. And, yes, we need to make a paycheck for our family, but also we need to make an emotional paycheck to our family as well. Because if we are not doing something we love, we cannot emotionally be worth anything at all. We have no value emotionally to our family. And I
yeah,
think about this too. I think about the sons like yours and the daughters like mine that don't have a dad figure like you and I think about that. I think about the fact that you and I are choosing that, but I see it in my teaching and my coaching. We play a role, and I would hope that if someone that has kind of a poor dad experience as well, because some people do, could listen to something like this and say, you know what, there's hope for me too. And I think that's one thing that we can break a narrative of too. Is like you don't necessarily have to have that dad to look to believe in yourself. And I think something that you're doing right now, at least for me in this conversation, and I can speak truth and life into what you're doing when you get on a stage, is you're setting an example for people. You're telling them it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what you've dealt with. You've got a chance right now to break that cycle. And we are intentional with our own kids, but we also have a role in other kids' lives too, and in other people's lives. Whether that's writing a kid's book, whether that's writing a motivational book like I know you do, and I want to hear about that, or getting up and sharing something, or maybe somebody clicking on this video, and saying, "Oh, these are two guys. They look pretty cool. They got some cool hats on. I think there's spray paint on that dude's wall. His shirt looks cool. I don't know. We don't know why people listen to what they do,
Right,
but like,
right.
but that's the thing is like, what can we do to make some kind of impact? And so I guess as we transition this thought of like, okay, we got dreams, we got goals. You and I are trying to be great dads. There are not great dads everywhere, but I truly believe this, and maybe I'm wrong. I believe in the core of every dad lives this seed that wants to grow into a tree, that wants to grow
Mm,
into being a great dad at this season. Maybe they screwed up last season. Maybe they had a bad start. I'm a track and field guy. But you know what? They have a good middle race and a good finish. And so, how can we today, you and I, in the last 5 minutes of our 30-minute session, I like to keep it 30 minutes, how can you and I get that information out to dads who might be struggling right now? Like what can we do? What can you and I do right now in 5 minutes to help them get a vision? Maybe to, young adults, young males that are out there listening right now that are in the situation that you were in. How can we get them going the right direction? What can we do today in this conversation to point their toes on the starting line towards the race?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best things we can do right now with the time we have is to let them know that it's bigger than them. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm learning as a dad, as a leader of my home. It's like, oh, it's bigger than me. Whatever moves forward in regards to our family lineage, it's because of what I did in my time here.
Hmm.
And when we think more of what that looks like being bigger than us, it takes the focus off us in a healthy way. Not that we ignore ourselves, but we start to think bigger than ourselves. So our actions, they just kind of change naturally. There most mornings I don't want to get up.
Hmm.
Let's be real.
Right.
Most mornings I'm trying to hit snooze, but I'm always thinking the bigger picture. Hey, this is going to yield fruit and reward later down the line. This is going to bless my family later down the line. This is going to empower my children later down the line if I do these things, because I'm going to instill these things in them. And we have to think of it in small chunks. I know people like to do yearly goals in 5 years and 10 years. Hey, look, you got today.
Hmm.
How can you make today the best day that you can? How can you be present minded today? How can you get done the things you need to get done today? And then over time, you accumulate. And then you look up, months have passed by, a year or two have passed by. You're like, man, I don't even recognize who I am anymore. I'm a whole different kind of person because I made decisions every single day to just take one step forward. And these decisions were based upon things that were greater than me. One of the hardest thoughts that I have, and it almost brings me to tears when I think about it, it is who suffers if I don't show up?
Hmm.
So I think about my family a lot. So one of my biggest things is, hey, if I don't do this, if I don't show up in this way, if I don't give my best effort to the things that I said that I desire to do, my dreams and goals, who suffers as a result of it? And automatically it comes up, my son and my wife. Those are the first individuals who catch the impact of me not showing up and being who I need to be as a husband, as a father, as a leader. And on the flip side, they'll be the first ones that yield the reward and the return as well. So
Beautiful.
for me, pain almost is a motivator in a sense of like,
Yeah.
man, I'm so afraid that if I don't do this, you know, my girls, my boys, they will lack what they need.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to let that happen.
You're putting a stake down. You're saying there's that analogy of the dog soldier back in the day where they would put the stake down and they would tie themselves to the stake and they would say, "I'm not leaving this stake. I'm going to protect what's behind me." And
Mm,
there's a soccer coach that I used to have that would talk about that all the time, and he would say, "Just be that type of soldier." And I never knew what that meant until I was a dad. If I'm being honest with you,
mm,
like I could fake it during sports, like, "Yeah, let's go, let's protect this house." You know what I mean? Under Armour, right? Not
yeah,
a
yeah.
sponsor, but right there, yeah. But like I didn't know what that meant. You know what I mean? Like I just like at the end of the game I was just mad because I lost or I won and I didn't do I don't know. You know what I mean? Like the outcome was we don't do a good job of preparing our emotional athletes. Let's just be honest. Like we don't.
Mhm.
And that's kind of one of my missions because it's like I feel like I didn't get it. But then the first time I held my daughter, I was like, yeah, I'm like I would die in this instant if it meant saving her. And I didn't you can't really know how that feels until you have an experience like that. And I love that. And I love that idea. I wrote that down. Who suffers if I don't show up? And I think that dads need to hear that too, because here's the reality. I can show up today And sometimes for me mentally, I think about showing up 5 years from now for my daughters, 10 years from now, walking them down the aisle. We all think those things. And it's like we almost have to guard our mind to not go too far in the future because the future brings a ton of fear, right? And it's a good fear, a bad fear, because fear is not always a bad thing. Fear sometimes is protection, right, from things as
Yeah, for
well. And
sure.
so I think sometimes we say, fear not, or we tell our young, especially men of faith, and this is just speaking to those men of faith, we tell people, just don't do it, right? The opposite of Nike, right? Just don't. But we don't really give them a roadmap of why. And there's lots of things we
Mm.
could unpack in empowerment groups to talk about. Just don't do this. Well, but why, right? And I think so. Men of faith specifically, I feel like it's an underserved community of really telling yourself that it's okay to have emotions. Because growing up, I don't know if I always knew that that was okay. Because I had the faith, I had this. Why can't I feel this way? But the reality is, Nate, is you and I are going to feel certain ways, and those feelings are real, and it's okay to feel those ways. And your son is going to feel that way, and my daughters are going to feel that way. And we need to make sure that we are emotionally available to have those types of conversations with them today, right? At the level that they're at. Don't think about what's this conversation going to do, 10 years down the road. How can I help
Yeah, I
them
mean,
right now? And then for those
mhm.
young men that are out there that are like, you know what, I'm listening to these two dads talk. Like, I'm not a dad yet, but they're talking about sports stuff too. So I'm kind of interested. And I think people could apply a lot of what we're talking about today to those things. So as we kind of wrap up, I really want people to connect with you. I personally have followed what you're doing over the last month or so, and I'm just absolutely excited for you. So I want you to just tell us what's some big things coming up in your life here in the next few weeks, few months. And if somebody wants to connect with you, if what you said resonated with them, how can they do so?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, Sean, man, I'm just grateful to be here and I love what you're doing with this platform. I think it's incredible and it's super necessary. Regarding myself, the next few things for me, I'm hosting my first coffee and convos. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that name, but I felt really led to just create a safe space where I live at, where men can get together and just talk over a cup of coffee, maybe some breakfast. So our first one is coming up in a week, which I'm really, really excited about. And it's a free event. I just want to galvanize men, break bread, have deep conversation, and hopefully create community from that. So that's what's coming up next. And then shortly after that, there's year two of my summit. So last year I put on a 2-day summit in Philadelphia called Get to Worthy. This is year two, and it's going to be an incredible May 9th and May 10th in Philadelphia. So those are the next two big things for me outside of just speaking engagements and working on little small projects here and there. And if people want to, connect with me, lock in with me, I'm Nate Evans Jr. on, I believe, every platform. I don't
Awesome.
know how I got it, but I think it's the
Yes,
same
it
for
was
like
meant to be.
Instagram. Yeah, so I don't know if there's not another Nate Evans Jr., but if so, I beat him to the punch. But
Yeah,
yeah, Nate Evans Jr. on all the platforms. Definitely feel free to connect. That's also my website as well. So yeah, I would love to connect.
awesome. Well, I hope people find you, and I hope that they have the opportunity to hear today, maybe just a little bit of you and I's story that they're not alone. That whatever they're going through, it's not something they have to endure by themselves. If we want to go scriptural, we can use the phrase patient endurance. Endurance builds patience, and patience builds endurance. And so hopefully they can begin to patiently endure whatever they're walking through, good day, bad day, everything in between. If they're a dad of little kids, if they're a dad of grown kids and they want to fix their relationship or mend it, or they're proud of the relationship that they have, no matter where they're at in their journey, even if they've never had a kid and they never will be a dad, there's a role that we play in everybody's life that is just a call away. So I hope that somebody finds you, and I hope that this podcast can be heard by many listeners who can get that message and can have hope today and believe that they will be a call away tomorrow and not stress about all the things that come our way. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Just Call Dad. I hope this podcast finds you well. And if it doesn't, stop and pause, take a deep breath, and tell yourself, you got this. You're not alone. All right, thank you.